first day of Dhul Hijjah. So Eid al-Adha will be on Sunday.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Sunday.
Yeah. Yom al-Arafah will be on Saturday. So and so we will be just discussing these exact days, inshallah. And so the very first thing is to begin, inshallah, with a verse from the Quran, Surah Al-Fajr. What number is it? Does anyone remember? What surah number is it?
97. I'm guessing.
It's in just Amma.
Yeah, it's just Amma, and it is Surah 89.
Oh, you were very close.
Yeah, so Surah 89. So let's together go over these ayat because they address these 10 days. They talk about, among other things, these 10 days. Okay. So if you all have it open, you can just read the first few verses together, inshallah. Because it's related to the topic and also for barakah. We begin with the Quran, right? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. So let's all read together. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر. If you want to keep going, go ahead. ألم تر كيف فعل
ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد.
Okay, so that's sufficient for now, inshallah. It begins with Wal-Fajr, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by Al-Fajr, by the dawn. And so that's significant, right? The time of Fajr is significant. It signifies the revival, right? After you are pretty much dead, right? If Allah wants, He can just not allow you to wake up and then transfer you into the next realm. And so that's a time of blessings, a time where you have another opportunity. You have another shot at making amends, another shot at doing good things. And so Allah Azza wa Jalla, when He swears by it, it's an important, sacred time. So when He swears by things that are great, it usually has to do with just how big of a sign of God these things are. Like when He says "Wash-shams," when He swears by the sun, or by the earth, by the moon, etc. That's one reason. The other reason He swears by things is that these things have very, very important spiritual significance. So the time of Fajr has that significance of spirituality, and it has that attachment to the blessings of Allah, reminding us to be grateful. The next ayah, the second ayah, is what we are really after, وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ, and the 10 nights. So Allah swears by the 10 nights, and it's the 10 nights and days of Dhul Hijjah. And so the reason Allah knows best that layali is mentioned, the nights are mentioned, is we take into consideration that whole sort of 24-hour cycle. And so that night or that day, whatever you call it, begins at sunset, right? So the Hijjah, in terms of how Islamic months work and how Islamic days work, it starts tonight at sunset, right? And that's why on the night before Ramadan we start Taraweeh, right? Even though it's not the first day of Ramadan and the way that we're used to, right? But it is the beginning of that occasion, and so the daylight and nighttime aspect of these things is not really significant. What's significant is that entire period of 24 hours, and that's when what happens with the sun and the earth in a 24-hour cycle. What happens,
The earth revolves around
right?
itself and then rotates around itself and then it actually
Around the sun as well,
yes,
right?
it revolves around the sun.
So that the revolution around the sun takes
365.
yeah, so that's a year, but when it rotates on its own axis, that one rotation accounts for 24 hours. And so there you have that the importance of these things. So walayalin ashr, these 10 nights, they could have easily said wa ayyamin as well, and the word ayyam is also mentioned in the Quran. But you know, a lot of scholars say that these 10 nights that are referred to here are these 10 nights and days of Dhul Hijjah. Okay? And so then the significance of these 10 days and 10 nights is it has a lot of different virtues. But before we go into the virtues that are mentioned in both the Quran and the Hadith, let's think about a greater sort of wisdom and many different aspects of the days of the Hijjah. A lot of the things that are rituals of the days of the Hijjah, there is a common denominator. They have a common denominator amongst themselves. Whether it is the sacrifice, whether it is the tawaf around the Kaaba, right, when you go around the Kaaba 7 times, whether it is the walking and at times running between Safa and Marwa, that 7 times, other rites and rituals of Hajj, going to Mina, going to Arafat, Muzdalifah, and inshallah Allah blesses us to make Hajj if we haven't yet. All of these have one important thing in common, and what they have in common is that submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doing as He says without knowing the real reason, as if to remind ourselves that the reason I'm doing these is because Allah said so, right? And that idea can be expanded to many other things, right? For example, why is Maghrib 3 rak'ahs, right? Why not 4? Why not 5? Why not 2? Right? Because Allah said so, right? This sort of idea is there in many acts of worship, but specifically it's very prominent in the rites of Hajj and in the rites of the 10 days of the Hijjah, where you do as you're told, because this is something that emanates from, that starts from, and has its foundation in Iman. You have intellectually reached a place where you're convinced that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator. You've reached a place intellectually where you have no doubts about that, that He is the creator of all things, and that you've also, furthermore, reached a point where you are convinced that of the infinite number of ways people approach God, this is the one that makes sense. There's holes and there's flaws and other approaches and other ways of knowing God and connecting to God, right? Everyone says pretty much, right, other than the atheists who are a small minority, right? Right? Is it surprising that a very small minority of people are atheists? The vast majority of human beings, they believe in God. But why are we Muslims, right? Alhamdulillah. We are Muslims because this is the path that we think makes the most sense. The other people who have taken those different paths, they are our brothers and sisters in humanity, but they're not our brothers and sisters in Islam, right? But that doesn't take away anything from us being kind and respectful and just to them. The Quran clearly says that لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم. That Allah doesn't stop you and He doesn't tell you, right, to do this. Those people who haven't fought you, لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم, and they haven't driven you out of your homes, if they haven't done that to you, and if they haven't taken your rights and your land, all of those things from you, then because they believe, they have certain beliefs and they have chosen a certain path, it may be right, it may be wrong, depending on who is talking, right? But from your perspective, they're wrong, obviously, right? But that doesn't give you any right not to be just to them, right? So you have to be just to them. You have to, beyond just justice, beyond tuqsitu, which is justice, you also have to go a step further, and tabarruhum. You have to be kind to them. You have to show kindness to them and go the extra mile, even though you don't agree with them. So you have reached a point as a believer where intellectually you know that your path, your way of connecting with the Creator and reaching Him is the correct way, and that doesn't mean there's no hope for others. That doesn't mean that you're restricting God's mercy to yourself, right? Allah's mercy is too vast for us to kind of decide who will benefit from it in this world or in the next. However, you do know that this is the path, this is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs to be recognized and needs to be connected with. And so once you're intellectually convinced, and then furthermore, spiritually you have experienced Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the most important thing. People think by just being convinced rationally, you're done with being a Muslim. That's just the beginning, right? In fact, many of the people who connect to the Almighty at a very deep spiritual level, guess what? They don't know a lot of the rational arguments for the existence of God. They do know the basic arguments. They do know the basic arguments. Like some Bedouin at the time of the Prophet, he said, when I see animal droppings, that leads me to the existence of animal, that there's an animal that passed this path, that's why there's animal droppings. And so he says, all of these things that I see in my surroundings, in the desert, in Arabia, things lead to other things. Things point to other things. And so when I look at the universe around me, what's observable to me, of course it leads to the Creator. It leads to a firm sort of conviction in me that there is a God, that there is a Creator, right? So everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. And that's why a small minority of people are atheists. But then beyond that, that spiritual connection, the spiritual connection is also done. And then you experience Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ways that you cannot describe, you cannot rationalize, you cannot, sometimes your words are not sufficient to talk about. Those are things you feel with your heart, right? Those are things that happen to you as your little miracles, as your little signs, as little ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala awakens you, as little ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps you in times of your need. Little ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala jolts you and sort of, you know, um, uh, gives you a little bit of you know, kind of twists your ears, you know, to awaken you, not as a way to punish you, but to awaken you, and to tell you, hey, don't do this thing that you're doing, this path that you're on is not good. These are all different ways in which spirituality happens. Experiential spirituality of connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala beyond reasoning, beyond rational thinking, and all of that. Once a believer has gone through this, then when he or she is sure that this is what Allah says, then they don't question it anymore. A believer goes through these certain steps, right? And then after that, there's no questioning. I'm doing this because Allah said so, right? And I think I'm glad we have Evelyn here, right? A person who converts to Islam, maybe they can, they probably have a more immediate experience of this, that they can relate to us, right? That you no longer feel the need to know why is Fajr 2 rakats, right? Why do I have to make the sacrifice? Why 7 times around the Kaaba? Inshallah, you go soon, right? And so, my whole point is the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, the rites of Hajj itself, and all of these rituals and acts of worship that we engage in, they are full of these types of things where you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't question. Allah said so. These are rites and rituals that we learn from the Quran or from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so we do it. That is one of the biggest things in about the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and that talks about the strength of Iman. How do you strengthen your Iman? And how do you then test the strength of your Iman? This is how it's tested, is when you don't question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in secondary things, when He has already given you convincing reasons in the rational realm as well as in the spiritual realm of His existence. Over there you're satisfied, your heart is at rest. Then when it comes to these secondary things, there are no questions asked and there's no need to ask questions. And some of the rites of Hajj, it seems, are exactly for that purpose. Allah says, do 7 rounds around the Kaaba, as if to test you whether you're going to listen without questioning or not. Or you're going to say, well, what's the benefit of that? You know, what kind of benefit do I get? Well, obviously the benefit is you're listening to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has decided that that's an act of worship. He has decided that that is obedience. That even when it comes to this time, why the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah? Why not the middle 10 days? Right? Why not the last 10 days? Why not, the first 5 days only, right? That leads us to another important thing again, which is connected to this idea that Allah chooses. He chooses places for virtue. He makes some places more virtuous. You can read as much Quran as you want, and you can pray as much as you want in another masjid anywhere in the world. That masjid will never reach the level of Masjid al-Haram, where the Kaaba is, or the Prophet's masjid, the status that it has, or Masjid al-Aqsa, right? These are places, the 3 holiest places, right? No other place on earth can reach those places because Allah chose those places. Or with times, it's the same thing. The specific window of 10 days, Ramadan, the last 10 days of Ramadan, and other times around the year. Even in a 24-hour period, the times that are more virtuous, the last portion, the last third of the night for worship. All of these, again, are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing certain times. And it's His choice. And then He chooses people too. You don't go you don't apply to become a prophet, right? Allah chooses prophets, alayhi salatu wasalam, right? No amount of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was, of course, a wonderful human being before he was sent on the mission, right? He was known as the honest and trustworthy person. Yet that was not the reason why Allah made him a prophet, right? There were probably tons of other people who were very honest and generous and trustworthy as well, but they didn't get to become Muhammad. We probably don't even know about them. We don't even know their names, right? And so Allah chooses people, places, and Allah chooses times, and it's up to Him. We can't question that. That's the difference, right? He's Allah. He's the Creator. He's the King of all kings. He is not to be questioned. He's the one that will ask the questions. But that is, of course, understood in under the overarching umbrella of the rahmah and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, so then in terms of the virtues of these 10 days, right? And you, each one of you probably heard about the virtues of the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and you probably also heard that of the nights, it's the last 10 nights of Ramadan that are the best of the nights. Of the days, it is the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and in fact, the day of Arafah is the best of all days. In the spiritual status and weight that it has, that's the best of all days. And so, think about anything that you have learned or heard about in terms of the virtues of the 10 days of the Hijjah. Okay? And enumerate those, right? Think about that a little bit. How many do you know of the first, these first 10 days of the Hijjah? What are those virtues? Whatever you know. And whoever wants to go first. You could just say one virtue that you remember of the 10 days of the Hijjah.
What do you mean by virtue?
Like by virtue, what I mean is, it's called fadail in Arabic.
What makes them special?
Yeah, what makes it sort of special, yeah. Or they are special because of these blessings, for example. Those are all virtues.
Your dua is accepted?
Your dua is accepted. And so, in these times that are virtuous, last 10 nights of Ramadan, the specific 10 days of the Hijjah, certain other times, last portion of the night, when the Imam sits down between the two khutbahs, all of these are times that Allah, of course, has chosen for the dua of the believer to be accepted. So that's one that kind of applies to all of these virtuous times. Is there though a specific reference to dua that you remember for these 10 days? Because I know generally applies to these, because these are special times. So of course dua is accepted in a way that it's not in other times, right?
Isn't it where you fast, the day of Arafah, your sins are
Right. So there's
wiped away?
yeah, those virtues like the best. You may be onto something. The best خير الدعاء دعاء يوم عرفة. So you probably are talking about that. The best of du'as is the du'a of the day of Arafah. So there you have it. Yeah. So that is actually a real specific virtue that is mentioned.
Is that the day before Eid or the day
Before it.
before Saturday?
Yeah.
Nice.
This year is going to be Saturday.
Is fasting considered a virtue?
So fasting is one of the actions that's recommended on the
On the day of Arafah.
or the other days as well, right? So that's when we talk about virtue, then we need to talk about when you fast, what kind of reward and ajr does it entail? That would be a virtue.
Oh. Is it like your previous sins are forgiven from the last year and the year
For the
before?
day of Arafah, absolutely. So that's and that day of Arafah is one of these 10 nights, 10 days, right? What else?
The fact that this month is also Shahr Haram, Haram,
Right.
Shahr Haram, and so the 10 days, like you said before, specifically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about them. So they make them like the 10 days, Fajr wa Layali al-Ashr. So not only that, they're in Shahr Haram,
Right.
Haram. And so that makes it probably extra special for getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Absolutely.
Because he said so.
Yeah, and these 4 months that Allah has chosen to be the sacred months are Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, and Muharram, 3 back to back. And the 4th one is Rajab,
Rajab.
month of Rajab. So these are blessed, sacred months. And so again, these are special months. So these 10 days occurring and one of the sacred months, that's another virtue. And what happens during these 10 days? One of the biggest things that happens, right? That's another reason why these
Oh yeah.
days are virtual. Hajj, right?
Yeah.
So Hajj is another reason that the majority and the most important rites of Hajj happen and the first 10 days. There's a little bit of it left for the 11th and 12th and 13th day as well, where you stay in Mina and all of those rituals. But the vast majority of the obligatory acts, they happen, like the tawaf and being in Arafat during Hajj. Those are pillars of Hajj. Those happen during these first 10 days. So that's 3 sacred months, dua being accepted, Hajj. What else?
What, fasting during these 10 days? It's what Allah loves from us and attaining taqwa that way.
Absolutely. So fasting in these any of the 9 days, right?
Nice.
Right. So that,
Oh.
right. Because the 10th day is
Yeah, it's right.
Eid, and so on the day of Eid, you actually are not allowed to fast. And that's why it's disliked to fast on Friday, because Friday is also a weekly Eid, right? So Friday is kind of the weekly Eid, unless it happens to be one of the days which you're gonna fast anyway. Like if you're gonna fast, let's say the 13th, 14th, those the white nights, and Friday happens to be one of them, that's fine. Or if you're making up the fast, if it's one of the Shawwal.
Ramadan.
Yeah. It's a good one, yeah, in Ramadan. There's like at least 4 Fridays, right?
Tomorrow. Tomorrow's the first day, right?
Tomorrow, right?
Yeah, tomorrow's the day.
So we can't fast.
Yeah, absolutely. So other than those, when it's part of something else, but the making the intention of fasting on Friday because it's a sacred day is not allowed, because it's a kind of sacred day that's similar to Eid, so you should be doing the opposite.
Is it also like Allah frees people from Jahannam? From these 10, like if you worship God properly?
So I don't know if that there's a hadith about that. There
Not
is
like
about
beginning,
that
but
last
it
10 in about Ramadan, right?
Okay.
That the last 10 nights are the nights of freedom from the fire. Of course, indirectly, those are all mentioned. When your sins are forgiven, that's freedom from the fire, right? So that's kind of implied, even if it's not explicitly mentioned. What else do you remember? And so the Prophet ﷺ has said, "ما من أيام العمل الصالح فيها أحب إلى الله من هذه الأيام." There are no days in which a good deed is more beloved to Allah than in these 10 days. when it comes to days, you can argue that even Ramadan is below the level of the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah when it comes to the daytime hours, okay? And so, good deeds are always beloved to Allah, but they are most beloved to Him in these 10 days, and no other days have this virtue. So the companions asked, how about a struggle in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? When you struggle in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you're there offering the ultimate sacrifice in the defense of Islam and the community, right? Even that, so the Prophet said, even that cannot reach the good deeds of these 10 days. That's how blessed these are. Except the only person that gets a better ajr and reward than the person who is worshipping in these 10 days is the person who actually offers the ultimate sacrifice. Takes his money.
Shaheed. Oh.
Yeah, shaheed. Yeah, takes his money and his own self, goes in defense of Islam and Muslims and doesn't return. That person. That's the only exception, right? There's not too many of those. And so that's the level of virtue of these 10 days that the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned. And another is alluded to in the verses that we recited. وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ وَالْفَجْرِ وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ, the third ayah, right? وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ. There is, it's implied there. That's another virtue. What do you think that is? You might wonder what's وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ.
What there is?
Yeah, وَالشَّفْعِ and the even, وَالْوَتْرِ, and the odd.
Yeah.
So think in terms of the even and odd, right? And the most important day that we have mentioned so far in these first 10 days is the day of Arafah. So which one is the even day? The day after, right? So that's also some scholars have said that that's actually the best day of all the year, as opposed to Arafah. So it's so virtuous that it actually competes with the day of Arafah according to some opinions, right? And so that's another reason why these days and nights are virtuous, is that the day of Eid al-Adha, which is it has a commonality with Eid al-Fitr and the day of Jum'ah as well, because the celebration and the gathering, all of those things happen. But it's extra special, right? Because there is one extra thing we do on the day of Eid al-Adha, right? What is it? How is Eid al-Adha different from Eid al-Fitr?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice, right? Sacrifice. And so that is that's what makes that day very special. Now, in terms of going into the sacrifice a little bit, how many of you know that or knew that the sacrifice of Eid al-Adha, there are two opinions about it. One, and they're equally valid, all the way going back to the time of the companions. And when there is this kind of a difference, it's always a source of blessings, a source of that diversity of opinion always gives us more choices, more options. It adds to the beauty of the Deen, right? And so one opinion says that the sacrifice is obligatory, the other says that it is a recommended act. And there's a difference, right? And when it's obligatory, if you don't do it, it's a sin. If it's just a recommended act, you get the reward and ajr if you do it, but if you don't, there's no sin. And so, based on your understanding and kind of what you learned, what did you learn? Did you learn how many of you think or learned that it was actually recommended but not obligatory. Recommended, right? So raise your hand for recommended or sunnah. Okay. Raise your hand for obligatory, like wajib. Wow, there's a lot of Hanafis here. It's mostly the Hanafi school that, and some others too, that say that it is wajib, it is required, and they have their reasoning, of course. And so, when you do the sacrifice, the other important thing to remember is if you meet the threshold of your savings and wealth and whatnot, does each individual have to do it, or can one person do it on behalf of the entire household? Again, there are two opinions.
One person.
Yeah. So the Hanafi school says one person, like the dad, can do it on behalf of everyone in the house. Even if your parents, your children, your wife, they all live together with you. When you do that one sacrifice, it's sufficient for everyone. The other opinion is if you have your own money that's enough, that meets that certain requirement, it's certain grams of gold or silver. It's similar to zakat, I think, right? I don't remember exactly.
I think it's different.
But if you meet a certain like threshold of your own savings, even if you live with your mom and dad, you have to do your own sacrifice. So that's the other opinion. You can go with one or the other, right?
How does it work with people sharing part of the sacrifice? Like a couple people will chip in to do a collective.
Yeah, so that's the next thing we were gonna come to. So in terms of whether it suffices for one person to do it, the head of the household, on behalf of everyone else, regardless of whether they have money or not, two opinions again. And you can go with whichever, inshallah, it's fine. And then when it comes to your question, when it comes to smaller animals like goats and sheep, it's one per person. When it comes to bulls, cows, and camels, it could be up to 7 people. So 7 people can, and according to that opinion of one person being able to do it for the entire household, 7 households can just purchase 1 cow collectively and sacrifice it, and that suffices for everyone. And this sacrifice again is something that it cannot be replaced by money. You cannot say, I will actually, I'll pay the equivalent amount for qurbani and would not do the actual thing. So there are a lot of verses that address this in the Quran. Yes.
What if like you don't have the ability to slaughter a cow because you don't live in a farm or anything, like you send it back to like Africa or something to like family and then they do the
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. For you to ask someone else to do it on your behalf,
Yeah.
that's perfectly fine. But it's a recommended act, right? So if let's say you don't do it according to that opinion that says it is recommended, there's no sin, right? If you, let's say you really, there could be like Muslims that were like, I don't want to harm animals or whatever, right? Animals have been put at our disposal, and it's part of nature, and that's kind of an understanding that even when it comes to the wild, and when you watch these videos, people are actually discouraged to save the buffalo from the lion, right? They say let nature take its course, right? How are they going to feed or whatever, right? So an extension of that is us consuming these animals and stuff, right? Cruelty to animals and those things, that's a separate thing. But when the sacrifice happens, it has to be done, with kindness in a way that it's you don't torture the animal. And if you still don't want to do it, there is a way, there's a path, right? You could look at this and say, okay, this is a recommended act. It's not obligatory. I'm not gonna do it. There's no sin if you follow that opinion, right?
Even though if you were raised to believe that it's wajib.
Well, I mean, if it's individually. What do you think? If you think it's wajib, then most likely, if you are holding on to that opinion, then you probably are saying that it's okay to sacrifice, right?
So the two valid opinions, where is it coming from? Like, is it from two different schools or like?
Yeah, so it's always like the either the Hanafi school and the rest, or sometimes there's overlap. It's not always like. It's just the four schools, and what happens is you have either one school disagreeing, the other three having a different opinion. In this case, the Hanafi say it's wajib, the other three, and the Shia, they all say it's recommended. But it's not always like that. The division of opinions is not always like that. Sometimes it's two against two, having a difference of opinion on these things. So what were we talking about?
Or to sacrifice an animal or not to sacrifice?
Yeah, so like if you don't want to do it, at least in this specific instance, you have a way, right? If you, let's say you don't want to pray, right? There's no way. You have to. There's no leeway for that. I'm just trying to say there's leeway for people who may maybe incline towards, I want to be vegan, I don't want to touch animal product, I don't want to engage in sacrifice or whatever. You can still do that, and well, you have to know that this is, if it's not obligatory, you don't agree with that, at least it's recommended. So it's part of our rituals and rites.
But obligatory is part of completing the Hajj, though.
It's part of the Hajj too, yeah. That's, its own sort of, if you are unable to or if you can't, there are ways to make up for that as well. So that's, it's not like the kind of obligation without which your Hajj won't count. Like the pillars of Hajj are to be in Arafah, right? To be present there on the day of Arafah, and to make the tawaf, the obligatory tawaf. And so the sacrifice is not that level of obligatory for Hajj. So you could potentially, not ever sacrifice and be okay. But the ayah that I was actually alluding to was ayah 37 of Surah 22. So look it up, 22:37. Quran.com/22/37.
For those of us with traditional Qur'ans, what's the surah?
Surah Al-Hajj.
Okay, we're still
Yeah.
Hajj.
Yeah. So Surah Al-Hajj, ayah 37. Okay, let's recite this ayah together. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. لن ينال الله لحومها ولا دماؤها ولكن يناله التقوى منكم كذلك سخرها لكم لتكبروا الله على ما هداكم وبشر المحسنين. Let's try that one more time. You find it? لن ينال الله لحومها ولا دماؤها ولكن يناله التقوى منكم كذلك سخرها لكم لتكبروا الله على ما هداكم وبشر المحسنين. And so Who wants to read the translation? 22:37.
I have mine says, their meat will not reach Allah, nor will their blood, but what reaches Him is piety from you. Thus have we subjected them to you, that you may glorify Allah, for that to which He has guided you, and give good tidings to the doers of good.
You have the same exact translation?
It's like just almost exactly the same.
Okay.
There's words.
Do you guys want to try? Maybe you have a different translation?
Ours was the same as well.
The same? Okay. Which is it Quran.com?
Yeah.
So Sahih International is the name of the translation.
Alright. Cool. So I think this one part where it says, like the beginning, that the meat and the blood does not reach Allah. Right? And it's not of course you don't want to misconstrue that to say that okay, this stuff is kind of hidden from Allah, it's above Allah's knowledge or anything like that. That's not it, right? What's the actual meaning of the blood and the meat does not reach God? It is the piety, your piety, that reaches Him. How do you interpret that?
This reminds me, one time I was in the National Gallery of Art and they had a big exhibition on the Hindu gods.
Yeah.
Krishna and then Shiva or something. Anyways, they had a big, and I was almost tempted to eat from what they have. They have some kind of things and I was like, that looks very nice. And I think when I read this, it's like there are some traditions who go to great extent to actually make these sacrifices the end themselves, the end of the end, not the means of an end.
Right.
And I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this context is not really the doing of this stuff, because most of us in our tradition, when we sacrifice, you see a lot of people, they actually get caught up in the blood and the meat and all of that fanfare. But the taqwa, the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the purity of it, because He said to do so, and frankly, I think I still want to delve even deeper, because we grow in a tradition where it's kind of a festivity, but the kind of the, how do you attain taqwa by sacrificing this? I mean, that to me, that's what it is. It's not the superficial stuff, but it's closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Right. It's the fact that you do it with the intention of obeying Allah, right? And to the point where helping those in need, that's part of it too, right? But if that was the only thing, then you could have alternative means of helping the poor. You could just pay them cash, right, without giving them any of the meat, right? So if you were to pay cash or whatever, you get the ajr for that. But the ajr of sacrifice, that specific ajr you don't get. That's only when you do as Allah said, right? And so it is not the blood or the meat, but that's important. It is the intention behind it, the purification of the soul, the taqwa. That's what matters. And but the secondary thing is also not to be ignored. So look at ayah 28, same chapter, ayah 28. So what's the last portion of this ayah? What's the last portion of the ayah? فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا
وَأَطْعِمُوا الْبَائِسَ الْفَقِيرَ.
وَأَطْعِمُوا الْبَائِسَ الْفَقِيرَ. And what's the translation?
So eat from their meat and feed the desperately poor.
Right, al-ba'is al-faqir, right? And then likewise, in similar vein, in ayah 36, ayah 36 says فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا وَأَطْعِمُوا towards the end. Right. فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا وَأَطْعِمُوا الْقَانِعَ وَالْمُعْتَرَ. So eat from it and
Feed the needy and beggar.
yeah, feed the needy and the beggar. Al-Qani' is the one that's needy and is not asking. Al-Mu'tar is the one that's needy and is asking, is begging, right? So don't neglect them, regardless of how they express or not express their poverty. So that it's not about just the blood and you're done. You also have to now get the meat and do something good with it, right? You can feed it to yourself, your family, but also give it to those who are in need. And so the lesson of taking care of others is not completely neglected. If you think about the days of Hajj, the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, much of it is about self-purification. The lessons that you learn from the manasik, the rites of Hajj, the lessons that you learn of equality of all Muslims, all humanity, the lessons that you learn about obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without asking questions. A lot of it is focused on self-development, purification, strengthening your own iman. But even in this kind of a season when everything is focused towards self, the self, to make yourself better, the rights of others and taking care of others has still been accommodated, right? It's still been accommodated. And so فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا وَأَطْعِمُوا الْقَانِعَ وَالْمُعْتَرَ. On the day of Eid, don't forget those who are less fortunate. And then this leads us to the overall question or objection that many have about, why do you spend all this money on sacrifice? Why do you spend all this money on Hajj? You could give it to the poor and the needy. What do you guys think about that kind of an argument? People say there is so much poverty in this world, and you can spend that money to alleviate that poverty, right?
And like, I guess Hajj is obligatory for Muslim at least once in a lifetime, right? So you couldn't, I guess, yes, if you have the ability to do it yourself and possibly maybe, give that money for someone else to do it, but it's an obligation on you first.
Right, I mean, it's an obligation, and those people, well, some of them probably don't care about the obligation. But there's others who actually do. They say, yes, it's an obligation, but things are different, right? Times are different. There's all this poverty. This is also a way of worshiping Allah. So for them, it's either or, right? So.
Are you saying that there are some people nowadays that are saying that you can donate money to charity in place of the sacrifice?
They say actually this is something you should do, they say. So basically,
In place of it, they're saying you should.
yeah, in lieu of Hajj, they say stop making Hajj until there's no poverty, pretty much.
That's not
Okay.
like a pillar of Islam, right? Like feeding.
Yeah, of course. They say it's a pillar, but
No, feeding the
maybe-
poor is a pillar?
no, I mean zakat, right? Zakat is that's a pillar, right? So that's all about feeding and empowering those who are less fortunate, right?
But that's like once a year, like the obligatory.
Right. That's once a year. Of course, sadaqah, which is voluntary, that has no specific time. You can always give it. But the point is, what do you say to this kind of an argument? Yeah. What do you say?
Okay. I mean, I guess I would say like, if zakat is like it's an obligation once a year thing, and then from those obligations, Hajj is part of it. Then
It's once in a lifetime, right?
Once in a lifetime, yeah. But you take the obligation over the sunnah, or the sadaqah is like the sunnah. So if Hajj is on the same level as zakat, then you should take the Hajj over sadaqah. I don't know if that
Right.
makes sense.
I mean, that's when you get very technical with them, but these are people who are like, let's put away the technicalities. There are people that are dying. Give the money that you're using for Hajj for them, save their lives.
you have to save yourself before you save others.
Yeah.
Like maybe because everything that you do in Hajj like has a meaning, it's a way to purify yourself, and I don't think like zakat necessarily would hold the same meaning or value when you're participating in all of these different acts in Hajj.
Mhm.
Can I, sorry, I
Yeah,
wanted
sure.
to, I think I look at it as a way to connect with sort of your birthplace of where everything originated from, and to get a sense of the hardships that the people before you may have had to go through when you were doing the
Right.
Safa and Marwa, and like, you know, just being in that state of, it's a challenging state to be in.
Right.
To like connect with your Lord at like at his home, basically, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they argue against that. They don't argue against the benefits of Hajj.
But other, like if it wasn't obligatory, I don't think anyone would, like
Right.
Muslims wouldn't really even, you know,
Right.
do it as such. Like they wouldn't go back to all the way to Saudi to like, you know, fully understand what all this means.
Okay, brother, come on and then
Yeah,
you guys.
after, very complicated.
That was just like a thought, it's like a loosely structured thought.
You should have very good answers to this,
No,
right?
not very good, but inshallah, it will be good for you guys. Yeah, this is you know, actually this is the Shair Islam. Hajj is the Shair Islam. So if you stop that thing, instead of sadaqah, you can do the sadaqah from others. You have one car, two cars, three cars. But nobody can say, oh, you can take just one car only, and the other money you have to please give to the sadaqah instead of this. But for the Hajj, for the sacrifice, so one group of people always criticizing for the all Muslim Ummah, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But this is the Shair of Islam, like this is in the Shair. So, what's the in English Shair?
It's like a symbol or a
Symbol,
rite
because
of
if you
Islam, like
forget
something
this
that.
thing, because the Quran said this thing. So if you stop these things slowly, so your next generation don't know. Like I heard long time ago in the meeting with the Bill Clinton, he was in the church, and one guy stand up and say, hey, what are you doing there? The all Muslim purchasing the churches. So what you will do? He said nothing. Don't worry about that. They are purchasing the churches. No, don't worry. The first generation, the second generation, the third generation will be ours. So they don't care you are buying the churches and this and that. But we are still stuck there. Oh, you don't do the Qurbani, you don't do the Hajj, this thing. They are thinking from there long way, but we are thinking like this. So if you stop these things, and your children, your family people say, oh, okay, it's nothing. Because my parents didn't do this because they did the sadaqah. Sadaqah is more valuable. So when they grow up, they don't know about this and they never do this. So that's why encourage those people. They are going for Hajj, Umrah, Qurbani, like Odiyah. So please do this, because otherwise your next generation, nobody knows. We know the schools and everywhere now what they are teaching or something like that. So okay, this is my opinion.
Okay, but Fozia and.
While you go to make Hajj, the argument from the other point of view is that there is so much poverty, and you know, it just feels kind of imbalance. Like, okay, your children will go to the next generation and they're gonna go make Hajj, but as they go, they'll see so much poverty around, and they're thinking, maybe what's the point of using my money to go make this pilgrimage? Yes, it's a religious obligation, but not just the level of poverty, just so much injustice happening around the world. Like, they could use their resources in ways to help uplift and empower their community where they live, maybe. So the other side of the argument is like, maybe you can forego Hajj.
Yeah, I mean that's their argument. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can ask.
I guess like as Muslims we don't see like the dunya first, we see the akhirah first.
Mm.
So like.
But they're saying this is also akhirah to save
Yeah, but like.
people who are starving.
Yeah, as a Muslim, like maybe like we could say that poverty for them might be the struggle of this dunya that they have that might earn them Jannah, and for us like we have the means to go and there's an obligation and a sunnah. We take the obligation as people who have the means. Yeah.
Okay. Evelyn.
I'm wondering if it has to be that black and white, if one could not do both.
Right. Right. You could do both, right? Potentially. So that's one take on it.
Yeah, there's both. It's like there's sadaqah and then there's hajj. They're both like pillars of Islam,
Yeah.
which is kind of like the foundation of our
Mhm.
religion in the first place. And I feel like the imbalance of like poverty and like people who have like the means and ability to go, that's a system that's unfortunately seems like it's gonna be instilled forever. I don't think we will ever like live in an equal level ground
Mhm.
ever. And sadly for that, I feel like these foundations were placed like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's perfect. He made these pillars like based on like knowing the dunya and how it's gonna be. So I feel like you were saying like it kinda changes the fundamentals of it all. Like if you start like justifying like, oh you cannot go to Hajj and in place you can start doing that, I feel like it kind of messes with the playground that we shouldn't be messing. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Can I add something?
Sure. Sure.
Okay, so also to add, like I would say, why is there poverty in the first place? It's because like the hearts of the people are like like hard. So like in order to like soften people's heart, you go to Hajj, purify yourself, and then poverty will decrease because people's perspective.
Absolutely.
And when your heart gets big, you know, you want to give more sadaqah, you
Yeah.
want to help
Yeah.
give
Right.
more
So
charity.
the heart is the issue, the
Because you
problem
have,
is not.
because you have 11
Absolutely.
months for sadaqah.
Right.
Do sadaqah, mashallah, 11 times.
Yeah.
Just one time for Hajj or Qurbani, just one time a year. So 11 months for sadaqah, mashallah, mashallah, mashallah. Just one time, Qurbani and Hajj.
And Allah is the one who provides the book.
And you wanted to add something, Samin?
I actually have a question. I'm not trying to like play devil's advocate on the other side, but it did make me think about how expensive Hajj is.
Yes.
And you know, in Hajj you can have all of these different tiers. So I'm just thinking about like, I don't know, should we still be encouraging people to go participate in this activity, especially now with the Saudi government? I don't want to call them evil, but close to it. So I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean it's like the commercialization is that's really sad. It's really sad. I remember in 2005, 2006 something happened.
$3,000 for Hajj.
Yeah, I made Hajj in like 2002
Lucky.
and it was 2,500.
Wow.
Yeah.
Price.
And I did,
I only had one other person with me in the room.
I did 2001, $1,800 only.
Wow.
And now it's this year, $22,000. I'm reading the
An
report,
average American can't even afford
$22,000.
that.
Yeah. So it's beyond many people, yeah, unfortunately. So that commercialization aspect is not good. The fact that the entire lesson of Hajj is everyone dresses equally, everyone, the king and the queens and the paupers and the poorest of the poor, they all have to look alike.
I heard that.
That's how you dress, right? But the accommodations kind of go
The amenities.
against all of that.
Yeah.
Against the philosophy and the lessons of Hajj. So that's sad. That if there's something to criticize, that's to criticize, not the essence of Hajj
Yeah.
as an obligation. And so,
So what do you say? Boycott it because of those? Like,
no.
Not
That,
the essence of Hajj, but like the practice. The Saudi, like whatever. Like, can I say in Islamic perspective? Can I say like this is happening? I don't agree with the government or whatever. I'm not gonna go to Hajj. I'll spend my money on sadaqah. Is that like
but the Hajj, the fact that situation is going on does not does not negate or lift the obligation. The obligation is still on you, but then there are some things that you can discuss. Of course, Hajj is not obligatory immediately. There's some that say as soon as you're able and you have the financial means, you have to. There's other opinions that say you can delay it. It's not like salah, when the adhan is called, you have a limited time to make your salah. Hajj you could make this year, next. So that's at least one opinion that they are. So you can delay it. You can spend all the money to the point where it's no longer obligatory upon you. So call their bluff. Whoever says, I want to help the poor people, then help them so much that you get to a point where you no longer have the means to make Hajj. Then it's not obligatory anymore. And that's actually the people who say that are very cynical, because these are the same people who have no problem spending tons of money on weddings, on birthdays, on engagements, honeymoons, this and that. Not saying any of those things is wrong. When Allah has blessed you with money, in halal ways, you can invite people, you can have celebrations and stuff like that, right? But they don't remember the poor and the needy when they're doing these destination weddings, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So that's something to consider. Maybe with Samin first.
You mentioned, how do you figure out when it's appropriate to delay a Hajj? What is, in order to survive in America or really anywhere in the world, you need to have a certain amount of savings. So how do you figure out, okay, I have this much savings, but now I have enough to go to Hajj? I don't know.
I mean, so the two opinions, the one that said you can delay it, you don't have to have an excuse, right? You don't have to you can delay it. The other opinion says no, as soon as you're capable, you should make arrangements and make Hajj. And so delaying it, in their opinion, is sinful. But both are valid opinions within the madhabs. So there's that.
Is financially, is there a way to determine?
To do.
Like her question. Financially.
How would you know,
Financially.
right, that now it's obligated for me to make Hajj?
Well, how would you know? I mean, it's clearly mentioned in the Quran. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. Right? So you have enough to, let's say you have a household to take care of. You have enough for them to be taken care of while you're gone. You have enough for your, rent and airfare or whatever, right? And you get there, all those accommodations. So you don't go there and become a burden on others, right? Then you go there and you run out of money. That means it's not obligatory upon you. So.
Well, a question that I've been having with my friends too is there are certain people who like to go to Umrah every year but won't go to Hajj, right? And they would use that cost. So I guess it's just an open conversation. How do you guys feel about that? In terms of how to navigate when it's okay to, or do you guys believe that you should go to Hajj first and then decide to go to Umrah after if you have the financial means, or a kind of difference between that?
But once you get there, it becomes obligatory upon you. Once you enter Mecca, then Hajj now is obligatory.
So if you do Umrah,
So one opinion is that now it's obligatory regardless of your means. You have to find now a way to make Hajj, right? And so Umrah is not obligatory, right? So if you haven't made Hajj yet, that should be the priority. But that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to make Umrah. You can always make Umrah.
But if you make Umrah, then Hajj.
Yeah, once you're there, once you have entered, yeah.
During this time, if you're at Hajj, at Makkah this time or any time?
Only this time.
Like in these the months of Hajj, starting with Shawwal, right?
Okay. If you're in Makkah, then you have to go.
Yeah, if you haven't made Hajj before,
Okay.
right? So, but again, making Hajj, as you guys mentioned, it gives you that inspiration and that generosity of your spirit, and so much you can learn if you make a real Hajj and make it with a full understanding of why you're making Hajj. You're more beneficial to all of the poor people than those who don't make Hajj, right? that generosity comes from iman, right? And there's no better way than Hajj to strengthen your iman, to be able to part with the money that you have worked so hard to accumulate, to give it away in the name of Allah. Things like Hajj gives you that kind of heart, right? So there's one.
I think
Go ahead.
one question I guess I wanted to follow up on what she was asking is that kind of similar to zakat, that there's a specific actual calculation, right? Is there a similar calculation one has method, or even one is determined, or even scholars, for example, have determined later on to determine, yes, you are financially capable of Hajj or no, right?
If you are able to pay for all the expenses, plus anyone that you are responsible to provide for, while you're gone, you're able to take care of that as well.
Gotcha.
Regardless of how much, it could differ from person to person. So there's no specific threshold for that.
Okay, one more thing. By the way, the Hajj starts from 6,500, not from the $12,000 or $20,000 or $22,000. This is for luxurious things. Hajj starts from USA, $6,500 only. So if someone has $6,500, of course, Hajj pardon him or her.
But when you go there for with that money,
The whole package, complete package is
You-
6,500 starting from.
so will you be sleeping on the streets or?
No.
Well, you actually.
Yes,
Only walk
because
in
I,
lines.
I registered.
Okay, that's not bad.
But people want, oh no, I want to stay in the clock tower,
Yeah, well, that's.
and I want to go to Al-Khubsh camp,
Okay,
which is just in front of the
I have a
Jama'ah.
follow-up to that.
So of course you have to pay for your luxurious things.
He takes groups to Hajj
Yes,
and
I
Umrah, so
spoke with him
he's
last time, actually.
he's the expert on these
Starting
issues.
from 6,500. I
Right,
think
that's
6,500
doable, but-
afford anybody.
There's a quota of how many, you were telling me last time, how many Americans can go now, and there's
Before-
people who are
before
trying to
COVID,
go multiple times.
No, before COVID it was 30,000 quota for America. Now it's 3,000 to 4,000 only.
People, right, so that's what I'm saying, like, there's people who are trying to make Hajj
Mhm.
more than once.
Uh-huh.
Should they be discouraged to make room for other people?
Actually, before it was applying like 5 years, for 5 years nobody can go again. But now anyone can go.
Oh, that's not kind of fair.
Yeah, if you have 6,500, you can.
3,000 Americans per year,
That's not enough for me.
no.
Yeah,
Why are they
because
so hard?
throughout the nusuk they put only this quota.
Go ahead,
Of the opinions that you have read about Hajj, are there any scholars that ever say that it's okay under whatever condition, that it is not okay to go to Hajj? For example, if the land is led by leaders who are extremely corrupt or anything like that. Have you ever
No.
studied any?
And it has happened actually over our history. All types of people have ruled today, or like, years ago during the when all the civil wars were happening in the early days. Some very corrupt people were ruling.
Corrupt
but-
people
Yeah.
were ruling that you should not go to Hajj?
They
or-
were no, they ruled that area,
They
Hijaz,
ruled-
right? Mecca and Medina.
Medina.
Yet, Hajj.
Was
No
never-
scholar ever said this year there's no Hajj.
Because you are going for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Hajj, not
Yeah.
for those people. They are ruling that area.
But,
Same thing like this time.
but in the condition of you going there, all this travel, all staying there, like they make profit off you visiting. It's still
Of
okay?
course.
Yeah, and we should fight against that
Yeah.
system that does that. But that doesn't mean we should pause Hajj, because it's a slippery slope, right?
Yeah.
You pause one of the 5 pillars,
Yeah.
then you slowly start pausing others, and maybe one day you say, okay, maybe we don't need Hajj at all.
Yes. That's the main basic thing.
I have a question for you actually. What's it called? You said only like a certain amount of Americans can go with the 6,500, right? Is it a lottery system? And if it is
This is not a lottery system, first come, first serve.
So if I were, or do you get to take your whole family, or is it
You
first
can
come,
take
first
your
served?
whole family, you have to register the nusuk, and you can see the packages
Mhm.
price wise, You can choose whatever you want.
You can
Then-
buy it like as a family.
Yes, you can take a family, like 4 people in a family or 6 people in a family. You can buy same package for each one and pay that one, and you're done.
When should I register?
January, end of January.
That's
For-
the first
for
one.
Yeah,
this year?
first time.
Yeah.
This year, yeah, this year is done.
This year
This
is
year is
done.
done. Yeah, this year is done already.
But one last thing I wanted to mention about
Yes.
the objection to people spending money on Hajj is that there is this notion that in all cultures everyone embraces and no one objects to is sentimental spending. Okay, spending based on your sentiments, based on your attachment, and no one feels anything is wrong with it. Things like you buy your parents a gift, which is a very expensive gift. Things like you spend so much money on your wedding, you invite all these people. I mean, israf, of course, is never good, but people do spend, engage in sentimental spending. And if you look at the numbers for 4th of July to, anniversaries and, Mother's Day,
Black
Valentine's Day,
Yeah.
Black Friday.
how much money is spent, right?
Yeah.
And so again, the people that kind of single out Hajj, you can't take them seriously because they don't say anything against these other things, right? If they are opposed to consumerism, then at least you could say, okay, you're consistent. You're wrong when it comes to your argument against Hajj, but at least you're consistent and you're across the board against those things. I don't think stopping Hajj will alleviate poverty. I don't think stopping all the sacrifice will benefit anyone. It will harm people, right? All these people, like right now, I'm arranging for just amongst some of the community members here. They're sending money for a sacrifice to be done on their behalf in Afghanistan. It's like I think we're up to like 3 cows or bulls now. And to us, we were like, you can buy meat so easily, it's not even, a thing. It doesn't even like bother us to be sort of worried about that. But the people that we're thinking of serving, these are people for whom meat is like a luxury. Maybe like they can have it. This is probably the only time they'll have it in the entire year, right? And so how much value it has for them nutritionally, and they actually, where I'm from, they put some salt on the meat and they put it in the sun and they dry it, and so they continue to use it for months. And so people look at meat and all this, the animals that are being sacrificed and whatnot during Eid al-Adha, but they will not point fingers at Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or Burger King or these people, right, who kill like these animals by the million, right? And they feed people very unhealthy food too. But that's something that's even economically, in terms of alleviating poverty, it's very helpful. It doesn't necessarily give them a house, but it feeds them, right? Feeds them and their families, and that's a lot.
Are you taking donations, or are you taking donations for sending to Afghanistan?
I have 3 so far. So 7 people are partaking in each individual bull or cow, right? If you can arrange 7 more people, maybe we can do that.
And how much is the
So the average is $1,000 for like a big cow or bull. So the people who participated each paid 140 something. 1,000 divided by 7.
And there's no sheep, like
Well, that's also an option, but that's I think a little more expensive.
sheep is expensive?
I mean, because you're gonna be the only one buying it. The cow, 7 people are purchasing it together, right? The sheep or goat has to be by one individual, so that's probably like $300-400.
a follow-up question, just when you were talking about how, these sacrifices, they feed the needy. Is there any opinion that maybe the people who are not as fortunate, who are not as privileged to, like you said, for them, once a year it's kind of a luxury versus people who have more accessibility, I don't know if this is a more cultural thing where, people make sacrifices here and they're also distributing meat amongst like family and friends. Is there any opinion from a, religious or spiritual perspective that maybe the needy and the poor, like, is it more preferable to distribute the meat amongst them? Some people have this argument that no, your family and your friends, like, they come first in some way. Like, I don't think it's any sort of unintentional argument, but
Yeah, so it's not obligatory actually. You can keep the whole meat also. So that's because again the obligation or the recommended act is to sacrifice the animal. That's the main ritual. But of course, as the verses that we talked about and that we went over, they talk about feed those people, right? But it also says فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا, so you can eat it yourself as well. Keep some for yourself and then feed the البائس الفقير.
especially in times like
That's
times
good.
like this.
That's good. You have to make 3 portions of your whole meat. One for the only poor, one for your relatives and friends, and one for yourself. This is the best way
Right.
Islam is life.
So that's one very good way of like dividing the meat. Thank you all for a very lively discussion. Yeah, you want to continue the discussion? Go
No,
ahead.
one more question.
Sure.
Can you talk about like what should we do during these 10 days? Like what I know like fasting and sadaqah and like praying more. But during the daytime, what else should we do?
So any good deeds, like the hadith mentions, there's no days in which good deeds are more beloved to Allah than these 10 days. Specifically in terms of adhkar, like tahleel, takbir, tahmeed, right? Tahleel is la ilaha illallah, tahmeed is alhamdulillah, and takbir is Allahu Akbar. And other adhkar, right? The remembrance of Allah, just recitation of the Quran itself is dhikr, of course. And so to do a lot of that. And any good deed, any sadaqah, is, any charity that you give, that's all part of al-amal salih.